I did. Question. Because I just opened up the YouTube, so it's already on the intro.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, folks, and we're live with this special edition of From the Dark. My name is Darragh O'Connor, and I'm joined on the line by a very special guest, Messianic Jewish Argentinian-American independent researcher, lecturer, an author who deals with all sorts of worldwide issues ranging from theology, transhumanism, social and cultural commentary, movie reviews, and so much more. Of TrueFreeThinker.com, Ken Meahy. How are things, sir?
Most excellent. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Oh, no, the honor is all mine, sir.
Incidentally, just for you and your audience, I wore my Property of Giant Killer Team t-shirt.
I love it. So appropriate. It's so appropriate. Yeah, so we did a show a couple of weeks ago, almost a couple of months ago now, on the Nephilim and the Giants and all that kind of good stuff. So you reached out to the show directly about your new book, and I haven't had a chance to read all of it, I will be honest, but I had a chance to read through some of it, and I'm not shocked that you kind of took aim at the big names in it, but what kind of prompted the book in of itself, and what's your background coming towards it?
Well, and I'm glad that you stated it as Nephilim and the Giants, because that distinction will become important as we discuss it. That's been a fascinating issue for me for years now. And I wrote a book titled What Does the Bible Say About Giants and Nephilim? Styled giantology. And I thought, well, I'm sure that's the only book I'll ever write about this issue. So I thought I was pretty much done. So I thought that would be the only one. I don't only focus on the Bible, but I also talked about certain issues that are attached to these, which is the whole Smithsonian claim, the accounts in old newspapers, the famous chart of giant skeletons you see all over the internet, and certain things like that. Well, but then after that book, I thought to myself, well, maybe I should, since that was Bible-based, maybe I should write another one on extra biblical texts. So I wrote another one just on that, called The Apocryphal Nephilim and Giants. And then I thought, well, this is how, I have to go down the rabbit hole and all the rabbit holes. So then I thought, well, I wonder if maybe I should write one about what scholars and academics say about these issues. So then I wrote a book about that. I thought, well, maybe I'll write one about what more the common people think about these things. So I call them the pop researchers, being they're not necessarily credentialed in terms of scholarship or academics in this area, but they're extremely popular. So what are they saying about these issues? And so basically, I'm trying to get as good or well-rounded view on these issues as I can. And by the way, that includes, I always try to explain, I'm not just an armchair researcher, but I discuss these issues, and I've been discussing them with people all over the internet for years, hundreds of people. So I like to kind of get on the ground and just have challenge views, have my views challenged, see what we can come up with in terms of what is the actual case, what is the issue behind this whole thing. So anyhow, that's kind of how I came to it, is researching it from various vantage points. And with this book in particular it's subtitled, okay, so it's Nephilim and Giants as per pop research, a comprehensive consideration of the claims of I.D.E. Thomas, Chuck Missler, Dante Fortson, Derek Gilbert, Brian Godawa, Patrick Heron, Thomas Horn, Ken Johnson, L.A. Marzulli, Josh Peck, Casey C.K. Quarterman, Steve Quayle, Rob Skiba, Gary Wayne, Jim Wilhelmsen, et al., because there's actually many more. Those are just the more well-known people.
Yeah. Okay.
And based on their premise, okay, their premise being they want to start with the Bible and then pull into it anything else that might be relevant, such as apocryphal texts, epigraphical texts, folklore, legend, anything else. I thought, well, let me look at it from that perspective, which would be my own as well, incidentally.
Okay.
And I ended up finding that, well, the majority of what is simply factually inaccurate. And so that's kind of why I feel I need to give this long-winded introduction, so I'm not just some schlep showing up and saying, hey, these guys are wrong.
Right.
But just so it's known that just like people tell me all the time, they've done a lot of research in this area. Well, okay, so have I. And that's the issue, is that there's certain fundamental level issues that if you get those wrong, you will tend to get the rest wrong. So if you see it as a group of dots and the way that we connect those dots, right? A lot of the times the dots might be accurate, but the connections aren't, or the dots themselves are inaccurate, so the connections can't help but be inaccurate.
Right. Just for our audience, the chat is open, so if anyone wants to add anything or ask any questions to Ken, please feel free to do so. Going kind of into it in a bit more in depth, like obviously when you start researching, like our show was an introduction to it, and as someone who's listened to Coast, yeah, most of their life, the names that you pick up would be the guys who you're talking about, right? And I think it's kind of a very interesting who you go for. LA Missouri, I wasn't expecting to see there, even though they're one of the big names. Steve Quayle is like the name in this. So let's start there, because he's like the main guy who you would read to. His book Genesis 6 is like the starting point for most people dig into this. What specifically attracted you to kind of go there, and what points does he kind of get wrong on the connections from the dots, shall we say?
Well, when we're dealing with Steve Quayle, and particularly that book, we need to draw quite a distinction. One is you refer to it as his book, but it just so happens that through the course of the search, now this is after years of listening to these guys, reading their articles,
Yeah.
I mean, very well exposed to them. Just for this book alone, I plowed through about 80 books.
Wow.
And what I ended up reading is that, as I actually posted with evidence on my website, that book contains plagiarized material.
Wow.
Okay, that's just a
Okay.
fact. So now there are, okay, let me put it this way. If you try to shop for that book, you'll see it sells for of dollars, literally hundreds. Okay. The first edition. Now I was able to buy the second edition, it's more reasonably priced, maybe $45. That book contains 6 chapters that he just copied and pasted, which is okay because in this case it was from a book that's in the public domain. Okay,
yeah,
that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah, there are quite a few chapters in it that he plagiarized from Charles DeLoach. And so that's 2 issues. Is, well, one issue is whether he plagiarized or not. I can definitely prove he did. The other is, well, does that mean the information is false, right? So that's
that
a
was my next
totally
question.
different issue,
That was my
right?
next question.
So
Yeah.
Charles DeLoach book called Giants, a reference guide from history, the Bible, and recorded legend. And that was published in 1995. Steve's first edition was 2005.
Right.
So DeLoach is the one that wrote the sections where he goes country by country by country by country, region by region, and gives you some of the taste of their legend about giants, right?
Yeah.
That's all Deloge.
Oh, okay.
And yeah,
Well,
what Quayle actually wrote, as far as I can tell, for himself is actually even worse, factually.
right.
And so, if I may pick on the show that you made, that you put out, that you referenced when we began,
Absolutely.
that show
Absolutely.
contained, yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Like
So here's
as I
what's
said,
wrong.
this is the whole point. It's the whole point
Right,
of ours is to present the information and get people talking. The more people talking, the better.
right.
And
And
it's
you
not.
mentioned that even during the show, so I thought
Yeah.
that was great. Yeah. So I would say, as with Quayle, as with me, I'm sure, as with you, as with anybody, we get some things that are demonstrably accurate, and some points where we go off the rail. I mean,
Mm,
that seems to just be standard because none of us are infallible or
no,
omniscient, right?
definitely not.
Not one, right. So one of the main issues for me is, how could we jump into a discussion about giants without even bothering to define the term?
Right.
Right? Because it's vague, it's generic, it's
Mm,
subjective, and it's undefined.
yeah.
So I might have something else in mind. So I can think of maybe 6 different definitions for that word. 3 would be biblical, 1 would be metaphorical, maybe 3 others would be just subjective. So that would be step 1. Let's make sure that we're defining our terms so we all understand what we're talking about. Then we get into the discussion, right?
Right.
And so if there's giant legends from all over the world, well, what does that mean? What
Mm,
does that mean, right? Because, for instance, within the context of the Bible, if you're discussing unusual height, which incidentally, biblical is essentially a non-issue, but we can probably get to that, uh, then it's unusual height subjectively compared to the Hebrews, males of whom average 5'5" or 5'3".
right.
Whereas if you're talking to pygmies, African pygmies, about unusual height, where their males average 4'11". Or if you go to Norwegian countries, other European countries, uh, there's quite a few people walking around there who are 7 feet. I mean, so what are we talking about? And are we talking about a few inches out of the subjective average, or a few feet, or
Mm,
a few entire body lengths, right? Are we talking about building size giants? What are we talking about? See, this is one of the fundamental issues. The second of which is linguistic. The English term giant implies nothing about height in its now. It might have come to mean something about unusual height in its later usage, but the fact is it derived from the Greek gigantes, or gigas, and that literally means earth-born. It
right.
implies nothing about height, usual or unusual.
So you
And
think
so in that sense, fun.
you think the terms for one reason or another have kind of been melded together where people assume that giants are the same thing across all way, and that's one of the biggest kind of misconceptions that people have.
Again, yes, and just based on the fact that we would first need to discuss, what does any given people group mean by that?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So,
Absolutely.
so for, so for instance, when you're reading, I know that you guys discussed Genesis 6:4 specifically, and when you're reading an English version that is rendering, I can't even say translating, is rendering Nephilim as giants,
Mm,
you need to hit the brakes instantly and wonder why that's being done.
right.
The reason it's being done is because the translators of the Septuagint, a Greek version of the Old Testament from the 300s roughly BC, rendered Nephilim as gigantes.
Yeah.
So English some English versions just followed along and they just wrote giants instead of gigantes. Right. Now, one of the problems is the Septuagint renderers also rendered Giborim as gigantes and also rendered Rephaim as gigantes.
Right.
And it's generally just a terrible idea to render more than one word with just one word because it causes confusion. Because now you have three different terms that refer to three completely different things. And then it's followed up by, well, look, giants, giants, giants. It's all giants. There you go. And then you can mash it all together, right? You can just connect all these dots because you're looking at the word gigantes or giants. And well, those dots are not meant to be connected because you're not looking at the original language and in particular the original meaning behind it.
Yeah. And do you think basically with the whole fallen angels thing, do you think that's colored people's perception of it, where they assume that these things all have a unified look, or that you could even kill them basically, and they're the things that we think of as giants now, or anything like that?
You mean demons?
Yes, angels and demons, fallen angels are demons. Yeah, like, do you think that that's why people perceive them to be really tall or whatever? Is there a unified thing that we're missing out on by simple boiling it down like that?
So this gets back to the issue of pre-flood quote unquote giants and post-flood quote unquote giants.
Right.
Right. I know you touched upon that lightly. And so this is part of the problem is if you're chasing an English word around the Hebrew Bible, you're going to have that kind of problem because you're going to say, well, giants, giants, giants. We already talked about that, right? So the fact is the term Nephilim appears in two verses, whole by two.
Yeah.
Period. And so, well, but what about all the other references to giants? Well, those are Rephaim, and they have absolutely no relationship to Nephilim.
And linguistically, for our listeners, what is the difference?
It's not just linguistic. It's okay. So linguistically, there is no connection. It just goes back to what the Septuagint translators did, and we don't know why they did it. But they rendered both as gigantes. We don't know why.
Wow.
And it makes even less sense that they also rendered Giborim as gigantes because Giborim. So if you notice, Nephilim, Giborim, Rephaim, im is just a plural male ending for Hebrew words.
Yeah.
Right. So singular would be Nephil, Gibor, and Repha. Now Gibor merely means might, as in to be, that's all, just a description. So in the Bible, it's used of human beings, it's used of angels, it's God. You might be aware one of the names of God is El Gibor, right?
Yeah.
That's God is mighty. Yeah. So that's how little sense it makes. Because in Genesis 6:4 in the Greek, it's telling you that the gigantes became gigantes. Well, logically, you become something you already are.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
In Hebrew and the English, yeah, it's telling you the Nephilim became mighty. Sure, yeah, they became mighty. And then the Gibor, Rephaim, is just a name of a people. That's all it is. It's a main category under which there are subcategories such as Anakim, right? Like you might say, we have a nation and then we have states and cities and neighborhoods and houses and families or clans and tribes, right? That's all it is. So Rephaim is just a main reference to a people group. However, the root word, the etymology of Rephaim is Rapha, and that is also a very, very complicated meaning of which ranges all the way from healing to death. It has quite a wide range of meaning. So you do see sometimes Repha in reference to the dead, like you might read of the Rephaim Gibborim, right? The mighty dead ones.
Right.
So people think, well, so they're the spirits of the dead or whatever. No, it's just that same word is used for a people group and it's also used for the dead. And how do you know the difference? context. That's what it tells.
Right. And who, in your opinion, in your research, rather, in your formed opinion, who were the giants and who were the Nephilim?
Okay, see, this is part of the issue, right? When you ask me who are the giants, I don't know what you mean. And then if you say who are the Nephilim, well, okay, now are we bifurcating the giants and the Nephilim? Because remember, when we use the word giants, we might mean Nephilim by it. We might not.
Okay, well, let me
You see what I mean?
yeah, it's a tricky little game that they have, right? So let me refine a bit, right? So, to a person who never explored this before and trying to move away from it, right? Who are the Nephilim? Or they wouldn't just be giants. So who actually were they, and what in your research, like what can we validate that hasn't been said by these other authors? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would consider that a false premise if you don't mind me saying so. I
Oh
don't
no, not
necessarily
at
have
all.
to.
Not
I
at all.
don't necessarily have to say something they haven't said, but I wrote a whole book just on the question of their parentage, because obviously, if we know who their parents are, we get an idea of who they were, right?
Hmm.
So, on the book on the Genesis 6 affairs, sons of God, angels or not, I went through almost a millennia texts um, of Jews and Christians from BC time till just past 500 AD,
Hmm.
showing you who thought of what as far as who are the sons of God in Genesis 6. And the simple verifiable fact is original, the majority and the traditional view amongst both Jews and Christians in the earliest centuries is that they were angels.
Right.
Now, someone might say, well, I disagree with them. Well, that's a separate issue, though. It's just that's a verifiable fact. That is the majority view among the earliest commentators on this kind of stuff. So let's just, okay, we're going to assume that because we have very limited time. Okay, so
Yeah.
then that would mean that the Nephilim are half angel and half human.
Right.
Okay, so then what do we know about them? Well, we're told that they became mighty
Hmm.
and they were men of renown. They were well known for whatever reason. We're not even told why. We're just told they became well known and mighty. Okay. Then what else do we know about them? As they lived pre-flood. Only 6 people and some animals survived the flood.
Hmm.
Therefore, the last of them would have drowned in the flood. End of story.
Right.
That's it for them. Now, the issue becomes that, remember I said that Nephilim are referred to in 2 verses.
Yes.
One of those is post flood. And
That's
so
what I
the
was.
question becomes, well,
That's where I was
right,
gonna go. Yeah.
right. Now I'm going to give you um, a speedy course on the problem with the second reference. Okay. And
Shoot.
I'm just going to try to jam pack this. So the second reference is recording the claims that were made by 10 of the 12 spies that were sent into the land of Canaan to search it out. Okay.
Okay.
All of the 12 return to the camp and they're saying, hey, this is what we saw. Okay. They say the land is good. Here's some of this fruit. These are the people that we saw in the land, well fortified cities, and the people are strong, which it was intimidating to them because they're a bunch of itinerant desert dwellers, right?
Hmm.
All of a sudden, they're being asked to conquer these big cities with big walls and strong people who are protecting them. So 10 of them are intimidated, and Caleb, one of the faithful ones, says, it's a non-issue. Let's go. We can conquer them. Let's get it done. But the 10 of them said, they say, no, we can't do this, right? So right there, they're being unfaithful. They're being disloyal.
Hmm.
And then the narration tells us that then they presented an evil report.
Right.
So the first report they present was accepted as is. Now they're going to present something different. Now, within that report, first they contradict themselves because they speak ill of the land.
Right.
Then they embellish their original report, because originally reported twice that all the people in the land are strong. Well, guess what? All of a sudden they claim, oh, all the people in the land are of great stature. So that's an embellishment right there.
Right.
And then they go on to make three claims about which the whole entire rest of the Bible knows nothing. They claim that there's post-flood Nephilim. They claim that Nephilim are related to Anakim, and they claim that Nephilim are very, very, very tall. And
Wow.
now they were rebuked. They were rebuked having said those things,
Right.
and they also contradict Caleb, Joshua, God, and the rest of the Bible, because all of them affirmed there were Anakim in the land, but they say nothing about Nephilim, not a single word, not once, not ever. So the best course of action is to recognize through the narrative, through the context, that they were just presenting a don't go in the woods type of fear-mongering scare tactic tall tale.
Wow.
The
Literally.
Israelites as a nation didn't see any of that. They were told this by 10 people, and it's in the worst possible circumstances where they're contradicting each other, themselves, and contradicting authorities. They're embellishing. Obviously, they made it up. So that gets us back to that's it. After the flood, there's no more Nephilim. Period.
So my question on that, I guess, from as someone who's from Ireland and has these great, I don't know how familiar you are with Irish mythology, but we have the people of the She, we have the Tuatha Dé Danann, and they are in many cases giants, or would be similar to what we know as the Nephilim, son and daughters of gods or gods themselves. Where do you and a lot of that would be post flood, even in Roman mythology and Greek mythology, where the gods would exist after their flood story. Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think those traditions, which are very similar and would kind of line up to
Yes.
men of renown, like where does that come from? Is that a storytelling device, or is there more to it?
It's incredibly difficult to answer that because it's so incredibly complex. Because then
Exactly.
you would have to be able to explain all myth and legend and all history, right? But I'll just
Mm,
give you some basics. So, for one, let's just uh, finish up on the context of the Bible itself.
right.
Since, since the second reference to Nephilim is unreliable, we only have the first one to go by, and the first one does not provide us a physical description of them. So we have no reliable biblical biblical data as to what they look like. So we cannot say that they were unusually tall. That's for one.
Right.
Can't be done. Okay. Now, it seems to me what happened is after the Tower of Babel event, okay, I shouldn't start there in case some of your audience may wonder. Okay, the biblical concept is that all humanity lived in a region that was common to everybody,
Yeah.
relatively close to each other. So at the Tower of Babel, they are dispersed and they separate throughout the world, right? So then, what was then commonly known and commonly shared history would eventually come to be called myth and legend as it spread the world and as people embellish with time, right?
Mm,
Then those would become, and this is why I believe it was you who specifically mentioned that there are certain things every ancient culture has in common: a story
yeah.
of a flood, a story of interaction with gods or aliens or angels who came to Earth.
Yeah.
It's a certain basic concept like that. And it seems to me that's why, because this was once common history, and
Yes.
that was taken all over the world. And that's how you end up with all these stories. Now, let me be clear on one point. What if there actually were extremely tall, and tall is another subjective term? Okay, whatever. Extremely tall beings or people who actually did roam the earth. What do I care? That's a non-issue to me. I'm
That's
not
fair.
denying it.
That's fair.
I'm just saying let's set the groundwork and let's
Yes.
make sure that we're not building tall tales off of the word giant, for instance.
Mm,
So I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not denying much of anything in terms of the legend and folklore and myth that might have some truth. I'm just saying let's be methodical. Let's be
right.
extremely careful that we're not just plowing on because stuff sounds good and it's exciting. I mean, for instance, if you were funded by a sovereign to travel to a strange and foreign land, and you come back from your expedition, what are you going to tell the king? Gosh, I don't know. I guess we saw a new kind of platypus, or we saw a chinchilla that's albino. I mean, that's not exciting. You want to
Yeah.
claim we saw, you know, and if you get beaten in a battle, you might as well claim you got beaten by giants. If you were victorious, you might as well claim you were victorious against giants. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we need to
It's
consider this mundane stuff as well.
it's the whole Herodotus history kind of thing, right? Where it's like, I saw flying snakes. No, you didn't. It's like it's that kind of thing. Well, yeah, and that's a very good point. You know, I guess it's in this field, it's incredibly common to kind of come across those teams. And I would recommend everyone go over and check out your website, truefreethinker.com. Your book is on Amazon if anyone wants to get it there. But if anyone
Oh
wants to get it,
yes,
if anyone wants to get it directly from you though, is that possible? Can you
that's
get it?
always better. Yes,
Yeah,
I always recommend that. Buy from the author because Amazon's good for
absolutely.
marketing, but not very good for the bottom line.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So, like, you're doing physical copies as well. How does that work if people want to get in
Yes,
touch with you?
that's it. They just have to get in touch with me, and I can have it, no problem.
Awesome. Well, I'll leave links up to everything on the description below. Ken,
So
this has been
much.
fascinating, man. Thank you so much. We'll have to have you on again for a bit more.
Yeah,
When
I
I'm a
mean,
bit
we
more
just
informed.
scratched the surface, right? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I'm a bit more informed, I'll read your book and then we'll pick this up
Well,
because.
appreciate it.
Oh no, absolutely, man. This has been fantastic. Again, if people want to find you, go over to truefreethinker.com and your YouTube channel. I'll actually have a link to it. But we'll definitely have you back on, man.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I don't really do anything much in YouTube anymore, but they can just go to the website, and I have everything user friendly over there.
awesome. Well, we'll leave a link below for everyone there. But thank you so much for your time, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, bye, guys. Talk to you soon.